So, I never thought I'd be the guy posting something like this. I've always kept my head down, tried to do right by everyone. But things changed fast, and I can't keep quiet anymore. It all started with a gut feeling. I know, sounds cliché, but there was something off about Nancy, my wife, lately. She'd always been a little distant, but lately it was like she was living on another planet. When I'd ask her about her day, she'd shrug me off, tell me everything was fine, but I could see it in her eyes, she was hiding something. Now, I'm no fool. I might not be the most social guy in the room. Hell, I've always been the quiet one, the guy who sits in the corner while everyone else talks. But I'm not stupid. I've got a high IQ, and I'm not exactly lacking in ambition. I've been overlooked my whole life, by everyone. My family, my friends, especially Nancy. They all think I'm some kind of backburner guy who's never going to amount to much. They've always underestimated me. My brothers, my father, Nancy, all of them. So one evening, I'm going through some of her stuff. I'm not proud of it, but at this point, something in me snapped. It's like my mind just took over. And there it was, buried in her drawer, a phone bill with an unfamiliar number on it. Now, Nancy had always been the one with her phone glued to her hand, but this number? I didn't recognize it. At first, I tried to brush it off. Maybe it was work, or some random mistake. But deep down I knew. So I did what anyone would do, I investigated. I started digging through her texts, her emails, her social media accounts. She had gotten too comfortable, leaving everything open. And then I found it. A series of texts between Nancy and some guy named Mark. At first, it was all innocent enough, just regular checking-in stuff. But the deeper I dug, the more obvious it became. They were having an affair. And that wasn't even the worst part. No, the real gut punch was when I started connecting the dots. I found another text, but this one wasn't between Nancy and Mark. It was between Nancy and my brother, Greg. And the words I read sent a chill down my spine. Nancy wasn't just betraying me. She was in on something bigger. She and Greg had been working together, plotting against me. I couldn't believe what I was reading. She had been lying to me for months, but it wasn't just about her affair. They were both hiding something much darker. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the screen. The world felt like it stopped moving for a second. My mind was racing, but I couldn't process all of it. All I knew was that everything I thought I knew was a lie. I couldn't let it go. I had to know more. So I went deeper. And that's when I uncovered the thing that really set everything in motion. Nancy wasn't just betraying me. She was involved in something even more sinister, and my family, my father, my brothers, were all part of it. I didn't know it yet, but I was about to step into something much bigger than just an affair. Something that would make me question everything about my life, my family, and my own self-worth. The thing about betrayal is, it doesn't hit you all at once. At first, it's just this little crack in your world, something that's off but not too bad. You tell yourself it's just a glitch. But the more you pull at it, the more it unravels. The whole damn thing falls apart. I spent the next few days obsessing over Nancy's texts. I'd look at them late at night when she was asleep, like I was trying to convince myself it wasn't real. But I knew. And as much as I wanted to ignore it, I couldn't. So I started digging into the rest of her life, every little thing she had told me, every story she spun. That's when I found out more. One night, I found a receipt hidden in her purse. It was for a dinner at some fancy restaurant, one she claimed she had gone to alone. But there, right on the receipt, was Mark's name. That bastard. He had been with her. I confronted her about it the next morning. I figured, why wait? Why drag it out any longer? I wasn't some fool who could be kept in the dark forever. I thought she'd break down, maybe apologize. Maybe she'd at least pretend to care. But no. Nancy looked at me like I was the one who had done something wrong. Ron, seriously? This again, she scoffed, rolling her eyes like I was some paranoid idiot. That's just some guy from work. It doesn't mean anything. I could see the lies in her eyes. It was like a switch had flipped. She wasn't even trying to hide it. But I wasn't buying her act. I pressed her, told her I knew about Mark. That I knew everything. Her face went pale, then flushed with rage. You don't know anything, Ron, she snapped. You've never trusted me, and this is just you being pathetic again. Do you really think I would risk everything for him? She gestured like she was disgusted by the idea. You already risked everything, I said. My voice was cold, quieter than I expected it to be. You've been lying to me for months. The argument went on, but it wasn't about that anymore. I could see the cracks in her carefully crafted world, the way she was trying to defend herself with nothing but nonsense. But I didn't care about her lies. I didn't care about her anymore, really. What I cared about was why my brother Greg was involved, and how deep this went. So, I started going after that. I started digging into Greg. I always knew my brothers thought I was a joke. My whole family did, really. Greg had always been the golden child, the one who got all the praise. He was the charming one, the one who could do no wrong. Me? I was the quiet one, the nerd. I had a theory that Greg was behind this, that he was in on whatever Nancy was planning. But I wasn't sure why. So I followed him. Yeah, I know it sounds paranoid, but you can't trust people who've been lying to you your whole life. I just needed one solid piece of evidence. And eventually, I got it. I saw Greg meet with Nancy one night, outside a bar. They didn't see me, at least I don't think they did, but I saw them talking, too quietly for me to hear exactly what they were saying. But I didn't need to hear it. What struck me was how comfortable they looked with each other. Like they were too comfortable. Like they had been doing this for a long time. They weren't talking like brother and sister-in-law. They were talking like partners. I knew right then that this wasn't just about some affair. It wasn't just about Nancy and her little fling with Mark. This was something bigger. So I did what I do best. I used my brains. I started to piece together everything I knew about my family's business. My father owns a construction company. Well, he owns it, but it's more like a front for all the shady deals that go on behind the scenes. I've always been on the outskirts of that world, never involved, never really needed to be involved. But after all this, after seeing how deep the betrayal ran, I figured it was time to start looking into things. I wasn't going to sit back and let Nancy, Greg, and my old man keep running their game. They thought they could walk all over me because I wasn't part of their little club. But I was done being underestimated. I was about to turn the tables. But I needed to be careful. I knew that if I went too fast, too soon, they'd smell the rat. So, I bided my time. I started getting close to my father again, playing the part of the dutiful son, asking questions I hadn't asked in years. Slowly, I started picking up on things that didn't add up. Things that I knew weren't just random coincidences. I was getting closer. But there was one more thing I didn't see coming. My sister, Lisa. Lisa was always the one who seemed to be the least involved in the family drama. She was a bit of an outsider too, but not like me. She didn't really have the same kind of patience I did, the same ability to just keep quiet and let things unfold. And when I found out what my family had done to her, that's when I lost it. I thought I knew how bad it could get. But I was wrong. I had to act fast. I don't know what I expected when I started looking into my family's business. But I sure as hell didn't expect Lisa to be involved. Lisa had always been the quiet one, the one who stayed out of all the drama. I assumed she just had her life together, like a real person, you know? But as I started digging deeper into the shady stuff going on with Dad's company, I started hearing things that didn't make sense. Some whispers. Complaints from employees. Little details that didn't fit the picture I had in my head. So, I called Lisa. I didn't think much of it at first, just needed to get some information from her. But when she picked up, her voice sounded off. She was jittery, like she didn't want to talk. And that was when I realized something was wrong. Hey Ron. What's up? She sounded nervous, and I knew it wasn't just me being paranoid. Not much, I said, keeping it casual. I've been doing some digging on Dad's company. You know, just trying to figure out where everything's going with this whole situation. I didn't say much more, hoping she'd just spill something. But she went quiet for a moment. Listen, I don't know what you're thinking, but you might want to stop, she said, the words stumbling out like she was trying to stop herself from saying too much. What do you mean, stop? I asked, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. I mean, she paused, and I could hear her taking a deep breath. There's stuff you don't know, Ron. Things you really don't want to know. At that moment, I realized, Lisa was part of the picture too. She wasn't just a bystander. She was hiding something. Lisa, what the hell is going on? I pressed, but she cut me off. I can't talk about it over the phone. Not like this. Her voice shook, and I could tell she was holding back tears. "Just be careful, okay? There are things you can't undo once you know." My heart sank. I didn't know what she meant by that, but I knew enough to understand that Lisa wasn't just an innocent victim in all this. She was mixed up in something ugly. The worst part? I didn't know whether she was helping them, or if she was just another one of their victims. Either way, my family had become something I didn't recognize. And Nancy, she had somehow pulled all of them into this mess. I didn't have time to unravel it all though. Lisa's warning only made me more determined. The truth was out there, and I was going to find it. But now, I had a new target on my back. I didn't know what to do with Lisa yet, whether to confront her or just keep her at arm's length. But I wasn't going to let her, or anyone else in that family, use me as a pawn any longer. I was done being passive. It was time for the world to see just how much they had underestimated me. I didn't sleep much that night. Lisa's warning kept replaying in my head. What the hell was she involved in? What had they done to her? But as I lay there in the dark, I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't backing down now. I had enough. I was done letting them push me around. So I started planning my next move. First, I needed to talk to Greg. I knew he had been meeting with Nancy behind my back, and now I was sure he was up to his neck in whatever shady business was going on. But I couldn't just confront him straight out. He'd see it coming a mile away. I had to be smarter than that. I started showing up to Dad's place more, acting like I was trying to reconnect with the family. Greg was always there too, usually hanging out in the background, playing the good son role. But I wasn't fooled. I watched him closely. One night, I finally got a chance to talk to him alone. We were in the garage, working on some old tools, pretending to bond. The whole time, I was watching him, listening to every word he said, looking for a slip-up. "I don't get it, Greg," I said casually. "Dad's been getting a little more distant lately, don't you think?" He froze for a split second, but quickly covered it up with a chuckle. "What's new? Dad's always been a little detached. You know how he is." It was a response, but not a real answer. I pushed on. "I don't know," I continued, trying to sound nonchalant. "Seems like things are changing. Like there's more going on behind the scenes." Greg's expression flickered, and I could see the gears turning in his head. But he was too good at pretending to be calm. He just gave me that classic Greg smile and shrugged. "Everything's fine, Ron. You're just overthinking things." He clapped me on the shoulder like I was the crazy one. "Don't worry about it." But I wasn't buying it. The lie was right there in his eyes. I could feel it. I let it go for the night, but inside, I was calculating my next move. I couldn't confront him directly, not yet. But I was getting closer. I'd seen enough. They thought they were hiding things from me, but I wasn't some idiot they could walk all over anymore. I'd been underestimated for far too long. The pieces were finally starting to fall into place. But there was one more thing I needed to know. Something that would change everything. I wasn't about to let them get away with this. Not when I finally had the upper hand. I kept the pressure on, quietly, like a shadow. I knew Greg was hiding something, and I wasn't about to let him off the hook. But it was hard to get anything solid from him. He was too slick, too practiced at being the golden child. That's when I decided to go for broke. I knew there were documents in Dad's office, stuff he'd never let anyone near. So I waited for the right moment. One afternoon, Dad decided to go play golf with a business partner, leaving me the perfect window. I waited until the house was empty, then I slipped into his study. The smell of old leather and dust hit me as I opened the door. There were files everywhere, contracts, plans, and notes in neat piles. Most of it was routine stuff, but I wasn't looking for routine. I needed something that would show me what they were really up to. I dug through drawers, flipping through documents like a man possessed. Finally, I found what I was looking for, a set of transaction papers between Dad's company and a few local contractors. But these weren't your normal business deals. There were mentions of bribes, payoffs, and under-the-table agreements with some seriously questionable figures. And right at the top of the stack I found it, the name I'd been waiting to see, Mark. It hit me like a punch to the gut. Nancy wasn't just having an affair with this guy, he was involved in this whole operation. He wasn't just some random fling. He was a part of their network. Part of the plan. I stood there, staring at the papers, trying to make sense of it all. There were dates on these documents. dates that matched up with Nancy's affair timeline. But that wasn't all. There were also notes about Lisa. It seemed like she had been pulled into this mess, too. Some of these payments had her name on them, like she'd been involved in covering up something. I didn't know what exactly, but the pieces were starting to form a much uglier picture. I could feel the walls closing in. But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. I still had one more card to play. I took the documents and tucked them into my jacket. I had to move quickly. They were all going to pay for this. The lies, the manipulation, the betrayal. I was done being the guy in the background. It was time to make my move. But the first thing I had to do was let Nancy know I knew. It was time for her to face the music. I'd been building up to this moment for weeks. The anger had been simmering under the surface, but tonight, I wasn't going to hold it in anymore. I needed to confront Nancy, to let her know I knew everything. No more pretending, no more games. When she walked through the door that evening, I was already sitting at the kitchen table, the documents I found spread out in front of me. She tossed her purse on the counter and noticed right away that something was different. She hesitated, then asked, "What's going on, Ron?" I didn't waste time. "We need to talk," I said, keeping my voice calm. There was no point in pretending everything was okay. I was done with that. She gave me a suspicious look, then asked, "About what?" I didn't answer. Instead, I stood up, grabbed the papers, and slammed them down in front of her. Her face went white. "What's this?" she asked, but I could see the panic creeping in. "You know exactly what it is," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I know about you and Mark. I know about Greg. I know about everything you've been hiding." Her reaction was the same as always: denial, deflection. She crossed her arms, trying to act casual. "Ron, this is just some misunderstanding. You're overthinking things again." But I wasn't buying it. Not anymore. "Don't lie to me, Nancy. I've seen the papers. I know about the deals, the bribes, everything. You thought you could fool me, but I'm not stupid. You've been lying to me for months." She looked stunned, her mouth opening and closing like she didn't know what to say. Finally, she mumbled, "I didn't mean for this to happen. It's not like you think." I didn't give her a chance to keep spinning her web. "You think I'm the idiot here, huh? That I wouldn't catch on?" I shook my head. "You've been playing me, playing everyone. And now you've dragged Greg into this too. What did you think would happen?" She took a step back, like she was trying to create space, but there was nowhere for her to hide. "Ron, please just let me explain." "No," I cut her off. "There's nothing to explain. You made your choice. We're done." Her face twisted, but she didn't fight it anymore. She just stood there, holding the papers in her hands, like she couldn't figure out what had just happened. I didn't need to hear any more. I turned and walked out the door, not looking back. The truth was out, and I wasn't the fool anymore. Nancy was finally seeing what I'd seen all along. I was the one who had the power now. The days after I confronted Nancy felt like a blur, like everything I'd known had just come apart. It wasn't just the marriage that was over. It was my entire perception of my family. Nancy didn't try to stop me from leaving. She didn't even make a scene. I thought there might be some last-ditch effort, some desperate apology, but no. She was silent, probably too stunned to say anything. It didn't matter. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of a fight. But the fallout wasn't just between us. My phone started buzzing constantly. Texts from my brothers, from Dad, all of them asking what was going on, why I was suddenly blowing everything up. But none of them really cared about the why. They just wanted to know what I was going to do next. What they didn't realize was that they were about to find out just how much they'd underestimated me. Greg called first. Of course, he tried to act like nothing had changed, like we were still brother. "Hey man, what's up?" he asked, almost too casual. Like I didn't just find out he'd been part of this whole mess. "I know what you've been doing, Greg," I said, cutting to the chase. "I know about you and Nancy. I know about the business deals. Don't try to play me." There was a long pause on the other end. I could practically hear his brain scrambling for an excuse, but nothing came out at first. Finally, he spoke. "Ron, you don't understand. This isn't what it looks like. You're making a huge mistake." "No, Greg," I said, my voice low. "You're the one who made a mistake, thinking I was too stupid to see it. You and Dad, using me as the fall guy, thinking I'd just sit back while you ran your little operation behind my back. Well, I'm done being the joke. He tried to argue more, but I hung up before he could say anything else. The truth was out, and there was no going back for any of us now. Dad called next. This was the one I'd been dreading. I hadn't spoken to him in weeks, ever since I'd started digging into the company's shady dealings. I was prepared for the usual patronizing tone, the "I'm disappointed in you" Ron speech that always seemed to come up when I stepped out of line. But when I picked up the phone, it wasn't what I expected. "Ron," his voice was low, almost quiet. "I don't know what you think you've uncovered, but you need to stop this before you ruin everything." "Ruin everything?" I repeated, almost laughing. "You've been ruining things for years, Dad. You and Greg, using me as the dumb son who doesn't know anything. I'm done with it." He sighed, like I was just some problem he needed to fix. "You're making a mess of things, son. You don't know how deep this goes. You don't know what you're dealing with." "I know more than you think," I said coldly. "And I'm not going to let you or anyone else get away with it anymore. I'm not the dumb kid you always thought I was. I'm done being your scapegoat." There was silence for a beat, then he muttered something under his breath and hung up. That was the last I heard from him for a while. The thing is, none of them really understood what I'd been doing. They thought I was some quiet genius who couldn't handle the real world, the one who was happy just to stay out of their business. But now, I was in their business. And I wasn't going to let them walk away unscathed. With all the pieces in place, I was ready to hit back. I wasn't just going to expose Nancy and Greg, I was going to take down everything they'd built. Step by step, I started contacting the people who could make this all go public. I sent the evidence to a few investigative reporters who would know what to do with it. I filed complaints with the authorities. I didn't have a clear picture of what was going to happen next, but I was ready. I had a plan now, and I wasn't going to let them drag me down any longer. I could feel the weight of the moment. This was the turning point. I wasn't waiting around anymore. I had the evidence, the connections, and the resolve to do something about everything that had been done to me. The moment I decided to act, it felt like I was finally taking control of my life. I sent the documents to the reporters. I made anonymous calls to the local authorities. I didn't care what happened to me anymore. I wasn't the quiet, passive Ron anymore. The Ron who sat in the back while everyone else played their games. No, I was the guy who was going to expose it all. I didn't hear anything for a couple of days, but when the calls started coming in, I knew the wheels were turning. The reporters had picked up on the story. They were digging. And when the cops showed up at Dad's company with subpoenas, that was when the real chaos started. Nancy tried to reach out to me. She called twice, but I didn't pick up. I wasn't interested in whatever excuses she had left. Her betrayal had cost me everything, and there was no coming back from that. I knew what she was trying to do. Get me to back down, get me to let things blow over. But I was done. Greg came to my house the next morning. He didn't knock, just barged in, looking like he'd been up all night. "Ron," he said, voice tight. "You need to stop this. You're going to ruin everything. This isn't just about you and Nancy anymore. It's bigger than that." I looked him dead in the eye. "You think I care about you or Dad anymore? You think I'm going to stop just because you're scared of what's coming? You've lied to me my whole life, Greg. You've used me, humiliated me, and now you think you can just talk me out of this." He took a step back, like my words had physically hit him. "You don't know what you're doing. You don't know what's going to happen if you push this too far." I stood up slowly, my voice steady. "I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm taking back everything you and Dad took from me." He stood there, silent for a moment, but then the anger hit his face. "You'll regret this, Ron." But I wasn't scared of him anymore. I wasn't scared of anyone. As Greg walked out, I realized something. He didn't even care about Nancy. He cared about himself. This whole thing was about protecting his own ass, his own position. And now, I was going to take it all down. The reporters were all over the story. They uncovered the financial dealings, the cover-ups, the payoffs. Everything. Within days, the company was under investigation, and the pressure started building on my father and brothers. I didn't know how it would all play out, but I knew this. They couldn't hide from the truth anymore. And neither could Nancy. I'd set the ball in motion, and there was no turning back now. By the end of the week, everything had unraveled. The news outlets were reporting on the shady deals, the bribes, the misuse of funds. It was everywhere. My family's name was on the front pages, plastered across every headline. And the calls I was getting? They weren't from my family. They were from lawyers, journalists, even ex-business partners who suddenly felt very interested in the truth. It was surreal, watching the world turn on them. I had planned this out, but seeing it actually happen was a different story. I wasn't the same Ron who just accepted being invisible, the guy who watched as others took what should have been his. No. This was my reckoning, my time to see them all exposed for who they really were. Nancy tried again to reach me, but I didn't pick up. The phone just rang, and I let it go to voicemail every time. There was nothing left to say. I didn't care about her apologies or justifications. I couldn't ever look at her the same way again. She betrayed me, but more than that, she betrayed everything I'd ever believed in. She wasn't just sleeping with another man. She'd become part of a system of lies, manipulation, and greed. But it wasn't just her. It was my whole family. Greg was scrambling to cover his tracks, sending me texts with a mix of threats and weak attempts at reconciliation. Dad? He hadn't called, but I knew what he was thinking. He was angry, afraid, trying to figure out how to control this before it destroyed him. One afternoon, I was at the office when the knock came. I opened the door, half expecting one of them. But it wasn't who I thought. It was a police officer, handing me a subpoena to testify. I don't need to tell you what this is about, he said, looking me over. We need your cooperation. I didn't hesitate. Of course. I've got nothing to hide. The officer nodded. You're doing the right thing. It hit me then, this was it. The moment where everything changed. For once, I wasn't the one who was wrong. I wasn't the one who had to explain myself. I was the one who had the power now. And I was going to see this through, all the way. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. My family was falling apart, and I was at the center of it all, not just as the whistleblower but as someone who had finally taken back control. The stress of it all was heavy, but I couldn't turn back now. The truth was out, and there was no going back. Nancy was still trying to play it cool, but I could see the cracks. She wasn't used to being the one exposed. Every time I ran into her, at the grocery store, in passing on the street, she would try to act like everything was fine. But the look in her eyes, that desperation, that fear. She knew her world was collapsing, and she knew I had a hand in it. Greg, on the other hand, was making moves behind the scenes. I could tell he was scrambling to save himself. He tried to reach out again, but now I wasn't just ignoring him, I was making sure to cut him off completely. Every time his name popped up on my phone, I hit ignore without a second thought. Dad, though, he was the one I had to face. He was the one who kept lurking in the background, trying to pull strings. I wasn't sure what was worse, the way he tried to control everything, or the way he pretended to care while he was clearly terrified of losing everything. He finally called me. I wasn't going to take it, but for some reason, I did. Ron, his voice sounded like it was choked with frustration. You need to stop. This has gone far enough. Think about what you're doing. I almost laughed. Think about what I'm doing? You mean think about what you've been doing all these years? It's too late for me to turn back now, Dad. You don't get to play the family card after everything you've done. He was silent for a moment. Then, you'll regret this, son. I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. He didn't understand. He thought he could manipulate me into feeling guilty, like I was the one doing something wrong. But I wasn't. The investigations kept pushing forward, more documents surfaced, and soon, the fallout was too big to ignore. My father's company was under federal investigation. Greg's role in the business was exposed. The media was all over it, and I had made sure they knew my side of the story. The best part? The more they tried to cover up, the more things came to light. My family, for once, was powerless. I was done being the guy in the background. I was taking control. And the most satisfying part of it all? Watching Nancy's world crumble with it. By the time the official investigation started, I could feel the pressure on my family like a vice tightening around their necks. My father, Greg, and even some of the people who'd been involved in their operations were scrambling to cover their tracks, but the damage was done. The truth was out there now, and there was no going back. The media attention was relentless. I wasn't just some disgruntled ex-husband or disillusioned son anymore. I was a whistleblower, and everyone wanted to know my side. The reporters were calling, asking for interviews, trying to get me to share even more details, but I didn't need to tell them anything else. The evidence spoke for itself. Still, the more they dug, the more skeletons started to tumble out of the closet. I knew my family was watching, waiting for me to slip up, hoping I'd back down. But I wasn't going anywhere. I wasn't scared anymore. The calm, quiet Ron they dismissed for years? That guy was gone. The new Ron? He was unstoppable. Nancy finally cracked when her affair with Greg was exposed. I don't think she expected her dirty laundry to be aired out so publicly. Watching her try to hold on to whatever dignity she had left, knowing that everyone knew the truth, was satisfying in a way I couldn't describe. She sent me a message one night. It was one of those texts meant to soften the blow, full of empty apologies and justifications. Ron, I'm sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. We can fix this. I love you. I read it, then stared at the screen for a long moment. She still didn't get it. She thought I would just fall back into her arms like I'd done so many times before. But I was done. I didn't even bother responding. She wasn't the person I thought I knew anymore. And whatever relationship we once had, it was gone. Greg reached out too, through a mutual contact. He didn't have the nerve to call directly. He was too busy running damage control for himself. But I got the message loud and clear. Let's work something out. We can fix this, Ron. You don't have to go through with this. I wasn't interested in his apologies either. Fix it? He thought I was some fool who would just let him weasel his way out of this mess. It didn't matter how much he begged or how many excuses he tried to make. His chances were gone. The real kicker came a few days later. My dad, the man who had always treated me like I was just another one of his failures, called me again. This time, there was no pretense, no condescending tone. It was desperation. Ron, he said, his voice strained. Please. You're making a huge mistake. You're going to ruin everything. Think about your future. Think about your sister. This isn't just about you and me. I almost felt sorry for him. But then I remembered everything he'd done, the way he'd always kept me in the shadows, the way he used my sister Lisa as a pawn in whatever sick game he was playing. It wasn't just about me. It was about all of us. You think you can control me like you've done with everyone else? I'm done being your puppet, Dad. All these years you've made me feel small, but not anymore. You should have thought about that before you crossed me. There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear his heavy breathing, like he was trying to hold it together, but he was breaking. Finally, he whispered, "You've changed, Ron." I didn't respond. He was right, though. I had changed. I wasn't the quiet, invisible guy anymore. I was the one who took the power back. And it felt damn good. Within days, their empire started crumbling. Greg was indicted. The company lost clients and faced fines. My father's entire operation was under heavy scrutiny. And I, for the first time in my life, wasn't just a bystander. I was part of the reckoning. Nancy, Greg, and my father? They had no idea what was coming next. Because now, I wasn't just watching. I was the one in control. And I was going to make sure they never took me for granted again. The days after everything went public were a mix of chaos and strange relief. The pressure of holding all that truth inside for so long, keeping quiet, pretending everything was fine, had finally lifted. But it came at a cost. The wreckage was everywhere. My family, my marriage, the life I thought I had, they were all gone now, torn apart by lies, greed, and betrayal. Nancy, Greg, and even my dad, they weren't just scrambling to save face anymore. They were fighting for their freedom, their lives. The media hounded them, the authorities dug deeper, and the web of corruption they'd carefully built around themselves was slowly unraveling. And I was standing on the sidelines, watching it all burn. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. I had my revenge, but it didn't feel like closure. It wasn't over until I knew they'd lost everything. I couldn't let them just walk away. Lisa, my sister, had been staying with me for the past few weeks. She was quiet, watching everything unfold from a distance. I knew she was worried, but she never said much. Lisa had always been the one trying to keep the peace in the family, the one who thought if she stayed out of it, things would be fine. But that was over now, too. She knew what Dad had done. She knew what Greg had done. And deep down, I think she was relieved that someone was finally standing up to them. One night, after dinner, Lisa looked at me with that familiar worried look in her eyes. "Ron, are you sure you want to do this?" she asked, her voice quiet. I knew what she meant. She was worried I'd gone too far, that I'd ruined everything beyond repair. "I've already done it, Lisa." "It's done," I said, leaning back in my chair. "But it's not enough to just make them pay. I need to make sure they never think they can get away with this again." She shook her head, like she didn't understand. But I could see in her eyes she was grateful. She just couldn't admit it yet. That night, after she went to bed, I sat up late, thinking. The investigations were moving forward, the authorities were involved, but there was something more I needed to do. I'd spent years being invisible, being underestimated. Now it was time to remind everyone exactly who I was. I started making calls, lawyers, contacts I'd kept under wraps, the ones who owed me favors from the past. I needed to make sure that everything they'd done, everything that hurt me, hurt my family, came back to haunt them. I wasn't just going to let them walk away with their reputations intact. They would face the full weight of what they'd done. And I would be the one pulling the strings. There was a lot more left to do, and as I watched my family's empire fall apart from my living room window, I realized this was only the beginning. The days turned into weeks, and I could feel the shift in the air. My family was scrambling. My father, the king of manipulation, had never been in a position where he couldn't control the narrative. Greg was desperately trying to cover his tracks, calling in favors, doing whatever he could to save his own skin. Nancy, well, she was a mess. The affair was all over the news, and her reputation was shredded. But it wasn't enough. I needed them to feel it, to understand the full weight of what they had done. And that's when I realized I hadn't just been wronged by Nancy and Greg. It was the whole damn family. I knew what I had to do. The truth had already come out, but I needed to push it further. I started digging into old files, looking into the legal loopholes, the shady deals they'd made. My father had built his business on shady practices, and now it was time to make sure that all of it came crashing down. Lisa tried to talk me out of it again. "Ron, you don't have to go that far. You've already done enough." But she didn't get it. They had crossed a line, and I wasn't just going to sit back and let them walk away. This wasn't just about me. It was about them realizing that I wasn't their punching bag anymore. I started sending the last pieces of evidence to the press, to the people who could really make things stick. I didn't care if it cost me friends or allies. What mattered now was making sure they understood that what they had done wasn't going to be swept under the rug. The authorities were already on their trail. But I made sure to get ahead of them, feeding the media just enough to keep the pressure on. Soon enough, the story wasn't just about an affair or business misconduct. It was about a criminal enterprise, a web of lies that stretched for years. My father and Greg had no way out. The final blow came when the federal investigation was expanded. New charges were filed. Greg was arrested. Dad was facing charges for money laundering. Everything they had worked for, everything they had taken from me, was about to collapse completely. I stood in the background, watching it all play out. It was satisfying, in a way, to know that I'd brought them down. But it didn't fix everything. It didn't bring back the years they had stolen from me, or the trust they had shattered. But I didn't need that. I had my victory. And now, for the first time in my life, I wasn't the person they all thought I was. The guy they underestimated. The guy they left in the shadows. Now, I was the one calling the shots. The dust started to settle, but the weight of everything still hung heavy on me. Greg was facing time in prison, my dad's empire was crumbling, and Nancy, well, she was out of the picture entirely. But even as everything unraveled around me, I couldn't quite shake the feeling that something was missing. I'd won. I'd made sure my family paid for everything they'd done to me. But the satisfaction I thought I'd feel, the sense of relief, never fully came. It felt more like an empty victory. What was the point of all this if it didn't change anything? If it didn't give me back the years I'd lost? I spent a lot of nights sitting in silence, thinking about all of it. About how easy it had been for them to take me for granted, to manipulate me, to use me like I was just some background character in their game. And I let it happen. For too long. But I wasn't that person anymore. I wasn't just the guy who sat back and let things happen to him. The guy they could walk all over. No. I had turned everything around. Lisa kept checking in on me. She was worried about me, I could see it. She thought I'd gone too far, that I was losing myself in the chaos of it all. And maybe, in some ways, she was right. Maybe I had lost a little piece of myself. But I wasn't about to apologize for it. I wasn't going to say I was sorry for standing up for myself, for making sure my family, my so-called family, finally understood what it felt like to be on the other side of betrayal. I could tell Lisa was still processing everything, still dealing with the fallout from what had happened. Our family had been destroyed, and it wasn't something you could just fix overnight. She didn't know where to go from here, and honestly, neither did I. But I did know one thing: I wasn't going to let them win. Not again. Ever. A few weeks later, I started getting calls from the legal team that was handling my father's case. They wanted to know if I was interested in taking a settlement, a way to avoid dragging things through the courts. But that wasn't what I was about anymore. I wasn't in this for the money, or for some easy way out. I wanted justice, and I wanted to make sure they couldn't hurt anyone again. I passed on the settlement. I wanted it all out in the open. I wanted the world to know what kind of men my father and brothers really were. No more hiding. No more pretending. The case dragged on, but I felt more at peace with it than I had in a long time. Lisa and I were starting to rebuild our relationship. It wasn't the same, it could never be, but there was a kind of understanding between us now. We were the last ones standing, and that meant something. As for me, I'd found a new sense of purpose. My life had taken a turn I never expected, and while the scars of everything I'd been through would always be there, I knew one thing for sure: I would never be the Ron they thought they knew. I wasn't the forgotten son or the ignored husband anymore. I was someone who took control of his life, no matter what it cost. And I wasn't about to let anyone forget it. The legal battles kept dragging on, but something had shifted in me. I wasn't consumed by the anger anymore. I wasn't obsessed with revenge. It wasn't about making them pay anymore, it was about moving forward. I had already done what I set out to do, and the rest of it felt unnecessary. I kept working, diving into projects that had nothing to do with my family or their mess. I knew I'd never fully escape the shadow of everything that had happened, but I also knew that I couldn't let it define me forever. The truth had come out. The damage was done. But the world kept turning, and so did I. Lisa and I started to get closer again. She'd always been the peacekeeper in the family, but she was starting to realize that peace wasn't always the answer. I think, deep down, she respected the way I had handled everything. I wasn't just the quiet guy anymore. I had taken control of my life, something she'd always wished she could do. Still, there were hard days. I couldn't pretend everything was fine. The memories of what my father and brothers had done would always haunt me. The lies they told, the way they treated me, it wasn't something you could just forget. And I'd never get back those years, those moments that I lost. But the pain was starting to fade, little by little. I realized that, in a way, I'd already won. Not just because they were being held accountable, but because I had finally learned to stand up for myself. I had taken the power back. I didn't need them anymore. And that, in itself, was enough. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe it'll be quiet. Maybe it'll be messy. But one thing's for sure, I'm never going back to the old Ron. The guy who let everyone walk over him. The one who believed in second chances that never came. That guy is gone. And now? Now I'm just me. Finally.